Hat, sunglasses, Pepsi, notes, sources, thick skin. Check. You already know. Let's go. Welcome to Gold and Blue today, everybody. This is a college football channel. So if you like college football, hit the like and subscribe button. It's that simple. Also, send gear to represent your team and be a part of my background forever. All you have to do is send it to P.O. Box 360, Liberty, South Carolina 29657. The other day, I made a video about griping about the Big 12 possibly considering Gonzaga as a future member. And yes, the Big 12 is talking to Gonzaga as far as accepting them as a member in the Big 12. And the more I thought about it, the more I'm thinking this might actually be good for the Big 12. It's not really going to add to the TV deal when it comes to football, but at the same time, they're not going to have to split that football pie with Gonzaga. This is going to be a strictly basketball relationship between Gonzaga and the Big 12. And who knows, this could be setting up something big in the future for the Big 12. Maybe this is a hint pointing in the direction that maybe the Big 12 is looking towards the West Coast. Not just teams in the Pac-12, but teams in the Pac-12 on the West Coast. We've all heard that the Big 12 is interested in the four corners: Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado. And we've heard that those four corners are also interested in the Big 12. Now, personally, I've said this many times. I would swap out Colorado for Washington State. I think Washington State brings way more to the table than Colorado. Their fan base is much bigger. Top 25 in the nation. One of the biggest in the Pac-12. Colorado is not a great brand right now. I mean, they do have decent fan support, but let's face facts. Denver is a pro sports town. You're not really gaining that much TV revenue from the city of Denver. So I would swap out Colorado for Washington State, but that's just me. But we know that the Big 12 is interested in the four corners and vice versa. Now, on the flip side, I've also talked about maybe they're waiting on the ACC and the grant of rights to be dissolved. Maybe they know that there's 8 teams that will vote to dissolve the grant of rights and the ACC is done, and they can pick off the ACC and strengthen the east side of the Big 12 first. Maybe that's why the four corners haven't been invited or haven't accepted the invite, whichever way it's gone. Maybe that's the reason why that kind of fizzled out. Maybe the Big 12 is looking at, a Pitt, a Syracuse, a Louisville, a Virginia Tech, maybe a Boston College, and NC State, maybe a Wake Forest. I don't know. I talked about how the Big 12 could get 24 teams in another video. But this video is about Gonzaga and how it could point to some big decisions in the future for the Big 12. Now, here's the thing. If it's just Gonzaga and that's it, and that's where the story ends, it's not that great of a decision for the Big 12 because they're all the way out in the state of Washington. And then the Big 12 is Midwest, and then the East, or the Southwest and the East. Man, I have gotten ridiculed so much for mixing up Midwest and Southwest. I'm going to stick with Southwest because I don't want to get hit with, no, that's not Midwest, that's Southwest. So, excuse me, that was a mistake. Southwest and East. And then you have Gonzaga way out in the state of Washington. It really doesn't make that much sense, especially since they don't have a football team. And that's a lot of travel for most of the Big 12 when they do have to go on the road to Gonzaga. I mean, think about West Virginia. And remember, the Big 12, they play each other twice every year. So it is guaranteed that you will get a road trip in the Big 12. West Virginia would have to travel to the state of Washington. So that's a lot of travel for all these other teams in the Big 12. Now, the only thing that makes this make sense as far as choosing Gonzaga and not ending there is if the Big 12 has its eyes on the West Coast. What am I talking about? Well, I already talked about the four corners, right? Well, what if the Big 12 is looking towards Washington, Washington State, Oregon State? Because we know the new TV deal, it says by adding Power 5 members, you can increase the revenue 67% or 63%, something like that, per team. Adding a group of 5 team adds nothing. That's another thing to keep in the back of your mind. So whenever I did that scenario where the Big 12 could go to 24 teams, that's the reason why I left Memphis and UConn at the very end, just to fill 24 teams. You would not add those 2 teams in the beginning because they're not going to add any revenue to your TV deal. It literally says in the TV deal, group of 5 teams are guaranteed nothing as far as adding to the TV deal. So you have to focus on Power 5 teams. And maybe that's exactly what the Big 12 is doing. Not just the four corners, but the West Coast. I'm talking about Washington, Washington State, Oregon State. And yes, we all know that Oregon and Washington want to join the Big Ten. That is a fact. They've even handed their application over to the Big Ten, but they've been turned down. The Big Ten's like, you don't add enough to the pie right now. Now, in the future, if the Big Ten wants to get to 24 teams, then those would be two brands that the Big Ten needs to add. Washington and Oregon. Those are two of the bigger brands left available. Maybe they don't add that much to TV revenue, but if you want to get to 24 teams, those two would be a must-add. But if the Big 12 can grab them before, then that strengthens the Big 12. That strengthens their TV deal. And maybe Gonzaga is the way that they're trying to get to those 4 teams over there. I mean, that gives them a nice travel partner for basketball, an extra travel partner besides having each other. And Oregon and Washington, they have some great football brands. Make no mistake about it. A lot of people think that Oregon has the best football brand in the Pac-12 besides USC. And since USC is going over to the Big Ten, then that left Oregon as the best football brand. Washington still has the best football brand in the Pac-12 when you take away USC. So Washington is the prize. But Oregon is a close second. You do want Oregon. That would add a lot of TV revenue to the deal. Now, I've said this many times. The interests of West Virginia and the Big 12, they do create some friction because it is in the best interest for the Big 12 to go out west. Number 1, get the 4 corners, Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah. And number 2, get the West Coast teams, Washington, Washington State, Oregon, and Oregon State. That is in the best interest of the Big 12. But it is not in the best interest of West Virginia because that creates more travel issues. West Virginia already has a ton of travel issues in the Big 12 as is. And that's why West Virginia needs the Big 12 to add to the eastern side, which is why, as a West Virginia fan, I'm really hoping that there are 8 teams that will vote to dissolve the grant of rights, and the Big 12 can grab those teams out of the ACC so West Virginia would have their rivals in the Big 12. Because here's the thing, West Virginia has signed the grant of rights for the Big 12, so they will be in the Big 12 until 2031. No more talks about West Virginia going to the ACC. That is done, over with, at least for now. West Virginia is in the Big 12 until 2031. So now, as a West Virginia fan, okay, we're in the Big 12. Great. The Big 12 is a good conference. It's just rough travel for West Virginia. So now, as a West Virginia fan, I'm hoping that those 8 teams do exist. They do vote to dissolve, and the Big 12 does go out and get all those rivalries for West Virginia. That would help us out tremendously. Tremendously. And a lot of people get on to me about, well, you keep saying you want West Virginia ACC, so you're not being grateful for the Big 12. Yes, I am. 100%. My issue is we don't fit in the Big 12 whenever it comes to geography. So if they go out and get our rivalries, then I am 100% okay. I am thrilled to be in the Big 12. We just need some of our rivalries and some East teams for us to play on a year-in and year-out basis. That's all I'm saying. And if the Big 12 goes out and gets that, then that's a win-win for West Virginia and the Big 12. But right now, I think the Gonzaga move is for the Big 12 to also go out and get Washington, Washington State, Oregon, and Oregon State. So yes, I do think that the Big 12 is eyeing those 4 teams. And remember what I said earlier about the Big 12 going out and getting the 4 corners. Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado. I would swap out Colorado for Washington State. Well, if this Gonzaga move is a sign that they're actually going to try to go get those Washington schools anyways, then that problem is solved as well. You see what I'm saying? This is a win all the way around. You get the 4 corners, Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado, and you don't have to swap out Colorado for Washington State because you're also getting Washington, Washington State, Oregon, and Oregon State. So with those numbers, that means the Big 12, they would get the 4 corners. That would bring their numbers up to 16. Then you get those 4 teams out west. That brings your numbers up to 20. With Gonzaga, that's 21. You don't count them in football. But that's a 20-league conference whenever it comes to football. And now you can just focus on to see if the ACC votes to dissolve the grant of rights. Add 4 teams from the ACC. And boom, there is your 24 league in football. So maybe Gonzaga is actually a sign of much bigger things to come in the future. That's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that it's just not, we're just adding Gonzaga and we're stopping there. I'm hoping it's a roadmap to get more teams on the West Coast, and then they can focus on getting the teams out of the ACC, and the Big 12 would have a bright future. I'm hoping this is the way that Brett Yormark is thinking, because everybody's saying that he's a business genius. This would be a genius business move. Y'all let me know in the comments section. Number one, do you think that by the Big 12 getting Gonzaga, that is pointing towards trying to get Washington State, Oregon State? Number two, do you think the Big 12 also gets the four corners? Number three, do you think the ACC dissolves and the Big 12 also gets 4 teams out of the ACC and eventually gets to 24 teams? Or do you think this is a terrible decision by the Big 12 and they're not going to last much longer as a Power 5 conference? That's all I got for you for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.